Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to kind of hone in on a topic. I actually recently made a video about something similar. It may upload before or after this one, so it might kind of feel a little bit repetitive. Um, the other video is about mental illness and chronic illness and kind of how those two intersect. But this one is more specifically hypochondria and chronic illness. And can it happen? Is it a thing? And it's a very sensitive topic because a lot of us have been told, that it's all in our head. It's not real. We're not really experiencing the symptoms that we're having, or we don't have anything. And so I know that this is a touchy subject, but in my many, many years of being chronically ill, I'm going on 18 years of being sick. I've met several people, and I spoke about this in the mental illness video, and I've spoken about it probably in my other vlogs that I've done, where I have kind of made friends with some people, very brief friendships, or met up with other people that I've met through support groups and things like that. And there's just something that is kind of off. And there's something that I'm like, yes, they do have a chronic condition, but there's just something else there that I just can't quite put my finger on. And just something seems not right with the person. And, I understand that chronic illness can leave you traumatized. It can traumatize you. It can, it really affects your judgment. There's a lot of conditions like Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, even stiff person syndrome. They do affect the brain, and they do have secondary psychiatric symptoms like OCD type symptoms. Anxiety, agoraphobia is even one that's very common with stiff person syndrome because people are afraid of falling. So they won't go out because they have a very high likelihood of falling. And so that kind of triggers agoraphobia. And so I kind of feel like hypochondria, I mean, it would be very almost expected for your chronic illness to sort of trigger a type of hypochondria. The reason this topic came up is because I have been following this girl on Twitter. I've followed a lot of people in the chronic illness community. I recently blocked a lot of people because there's just a lot going on in the chronic illness community that I don't really like. And with the pandemic, things have really gotten out of control within the chronic illness community. But this girl, I had recently found her because we both, I guess, were diagnosed with Lyme disease. We were both on IVIG. So I was like, oh, she seems like a good resource. She seems really smart and like she's really on top of it. But I started noticing at the beginning of the pandemic, or like last year, which is kind of like mid-pandemic, she was talking about how she had gotten COVID twice. She got COVID twice, did not test positive. Then after she got COVID, she got long COVID. Now we're in 2022, we're summer of 2022. I just saw her recently post about monkeypox. And if you know anything about monkeypox, it's been circulating in the news. It's kind of the next big scary thing. And, so I thought it was really interesting that now she believes that she's got, or she had, monkeypox. Once I start seeing this sort of pattern, I start kind of, like the alarm bells go off and I'm like, this is really odd. So I wanted to kind of explore that topic a little bit more. And she does have CVID, which is chronic variable immune deficiency. A lot of people with Lyme and other issues have immune deficiencies. So it is quite possible that she could have had everything. The weird thing is not having any positive tests. So what could cause this? Trauma, as I mentioned, isolation, not being able to go out with friends or speak with your family, or, just not being able to leave the house. And I do talk about the same topic with mental illness and chronic illness. Also overlapping symptoms. we're hearing a lot about long COVID, lots of overlapping symptoms with chronic Lyme. I actually saw a video of this guy that I think he had a reaction to the vaccine, and a lot of his symptoms were very similar to chronic Lyme. A lot of the treatments that he did to regain some of his health, I think he did like hyperbarics. Um, he changed his diet, things like that. A lot of the same protocols that are used with chronic Lyme disease. So yeah, overlapping symptoms can really make you think like, oh my God, do I have this other thing? Or is this the reason why I'm not getting better? Now, it's like I said, it seems very natural that being chronically ill for so many years, being susceptible to infections can definitely create that sort of hypochondriac type of mental state. But we do need to be very careful with this, and I did address that in the video of mental illness and chronic illness. Doctors may believe you at first. There are doctors that will believe you, or they will at least explore, different diagnoses that you may have. But if you keep coming to them every single time something is on the news, because specifically these conditions, COVID, long COVID, monkeypox, they're all on the news and they're everywhere. I mean, every time I open the news on my phone or I go on social media, it's a new article. We're kind of going from like COVID to now long COVID to now monkeypox. And so the news has to do something to keep people engaged, and that's just what they're doing. Doctors will stop trusting you if you just keep going and you keep testing negative and you keep insisting that you have these things. And it's not going to help you. Trust me. I've been there. Like I said, the news loves to fearmonger, and we're the target. The people who are scared, the people who are at the highest risk, we're the target. Hypochondriacs are also the target. So we get sucked in very, very easily. Even I've been worried about monkeypox because I'm not vaccinated against it. I do get infections, recurrent infections. And so I'm just like, well, am I going to be okay? But again, there are risk groups that have been identified, and I'm not in that risk group. This girl is not in that risk group either. So, when I look at these people that I talk to, there's sort of a list of things kind of similar to the list that I made for the other video, where I start to strongly suspect that there may be an element of hypochondria, or that they're kind of letting it into their head a little bit too much. And one of the things that I've seen is a long list of diagnoses. And there was a guy that I spoke to a while back, and another different girl that had this laundry list of diagnoses. And as someone with 2 diagnosed conditions, I can tell you it took me years and years and years to get 2 diagnoses. How these people got, and it is possible to have many different diagnoses, but it's like, were these actual diagnoses, or are you self-diagnosing, or is this something that you suspect? And so when I see that long list of, I've got this, and this, but then you're messaging me and asking me what my diagnosis is because you're seeking a diagnosis, it makes me wonder, where did you get these diagnoses if you're asking me? And that has happened with some of these people, where they will message me and say, look, our symptoms are very similar. And I'm like, well, you have all of these things, that's kind of a huge red flag. Always having the latest illness. Like I said, if it's something that's circulating in the news, suddenly this person has it. Suddenly there's something different in the news, suddenly they have that as well. I think that is something that can be, that can kind of clue you into that person's mental state. Never testing positive, but still insisting on the diagnosis. That was what tipped me off with this most recent girl on Twitter, is that she said that she had COVID twice, never tested positive on the PCR test. She has long COVID, apparently. I'm not sure how she got diagnosed for that, but I think she's participating in like a study for that. And again, you have chronic Lyme as well, so how do you know which is which? And then now she suspects she has monkeypox, and a doctor told her it was dermatitis, and she's just like, no. And the other thing that happens is that they start turning to other tests and other unapproved, um, you know, unproven tests, things that are not FDA approved. I've had non FDA approved tests done as well. And they just go and they start exploring that to see if somehow they can get this diagnosis. Um, and she was listing, she did this whole thread on what she was doing because she suspected she had monkeypox because the doctors weren't listening to her. So that to me, that's another one, the obsessiveness, the insistence, not listening to the doctors. The doctor had told her, it looks like you have some dermatitis, like a little dermatitis outbreak. Basically, it's like, no, that's not the answer that I wanted. So now I'm going to turn to these other tests, and do that. And again, the long thread on her symptoms and everything else that she was doing to try to get this diagnosis, even though it was confirmed that she didn't have it. Also, not being able to really talk or focus on anything else but that. The only time I see her post is when it comes to, illness and that kind of thing. And yes, a lot of us are consumed by our illness. I have a whole channel dedicated to it. But I think that, and I talked about that with the mental illness and chronic illness, not being able to discuss other things or to sort of have any kind of normal conversation with people about something different, is definitely not healthy at all, even with other things that are not illness related. So I started seeing those things, and, she's really nice and she seems really smart. But that's another thing too that I've noticed with a lot of these people that I've encountered, is that they can sound very, very intelligent. They can sound like they know exactly what they're talking about, and they don't. There are some people that are just very good at sounding, because we've been exposed to so much medical terminology. We've had to learn how to understand blood tests and things like that. Sometimes we think we are smarter than the doctors, and in some ways we are. In some ways we do know our body better than anybody else. But I think when you keep having negative tests, when you keep getting tested for something and it keeps coming back negative, and then suddenly here's another illness and now you have that as well, I definitely would question that. There are other illnesses and other things in the news, but they don't have as high of a profile or as much being written about them as, COVID and monkeypox right now. And so that's kind of what makes me suspicious that, this person may have some other psychological problems along with their chronic illness. And I do believe her that she's sick. She's got a lot of issues. She has CVID. She's on IVIG for that. Also, IVIG helps you to battle infection and helps you to fight off all these other things and helps reduce inflammation. So for me to sort of see that she's got, she believes that she has long COVID, the IVIG would definitely help with long COVID symptoms. It helped me with my chronic Lyme symptoms. It doesn't resolve them, but it does help. I believe she's still working. So again, a lot of different things, a lot of elements in her story really don't don't add up to me. Should I judge her for that? No. And I like I said before, yeah, maybe she does have monkeypox. I don't know. But regardless of whether you have these illnesses or not, all of us that have a chronic condition need to see a therapist. And it should happen with the first diagnosis. Because if you don't see a therapist, this kind of thing will happen, right? The ruminations, I have a lot of ruminations. I yes, as soon as I saw the monkeypox thing, I was like, oh my God, what if I get that? Your mind will kind of get ahead of itself. And I do think hypochondria is kind of a natural, um, a natural way that your brain will go when you have a chronic condition, and also when you have recurrent infections and things like that. So, I really do think that these two things do happen together probably more often than we believe. If doctors are telling you, look, your tests are not coming back positive, you know, and you continue to insist, then I'm not really sure. I mean, yeah, and Lyme disease tests don't always come back positive, and you still have symptoms. MECFS is very difficult to diagnose. There's really no blood work or no blood test to show you that. It doesn't mean that you don't have it. Um, but again, there's a lot of different things here, things that I mentioned on my list, and a combination of all these different traits and all these different behaviors, I think would suggest more that this is a psychological problem rather than a physical illness. And like I said, monkeypox, I believe, has a reliable test. COVID has pretty reliable tests. I tested negative for COVID back in December, and I just recently tested positive for antibodies. Um, who knows why? I could have had COVID, but my test came back negative. I had no choice but just to say, okay, the test is the test, and I and move on. I didn't go around looking for, or keep testing myself until I tested positive. You just accept what they tell you and then, continue on with your life. Um, I do think it's important, this being a hypochondriac on top of your chronic illness can make your chronic condition worse. It will stress you out. You'll be in a constant state of high alert, and that will stress your immune system. I've had to learn to really relax, especially right now with COVID. I have to really take it easy because it's not going to be good for my immune system. Um, and so, sometimes that is accepting that we'll eventually get sick with something. We'll eventually get a flu. We'll eventually get COVID. We'll eventually get monkeypox or something. And we just sort of have to not focus too much on that. And that's where the psychological help comes in, having a therapist. And the therapist will tell you, like, well, have you had any exposure recently? Are you part of one of the risk groups? They will kind of work through that with you so that you're thinking more rationally, because like I said, this will hurt you in the end, constantly going to a doctor with every single thing that you think you have. And eventually doctors, even if you are sick, they will eventually stop believing you or even stop talking to you, because I mean, yeah, there are people that are always sick, that always have some kind of an infection, but we kind of have to be reasonable here. And I mean, your brain is just as important as your body, and if that's not being taken care of, your body's going to suffer for it. So that's what I have for you guys today. I know that this is controversial. I know that this is something that a lot of us don't want to hear. But I've had so many encounters with people like this in the chronic illness community over the last 18 years that I really do think that there has to be some kind of a link between psychological illness and physical illness, and vice versa. I do think that they can feed into each other. One can trigger the other. But it doesn't mean that you aren't physically sick, but it does mean that you still need to get therapy for it. And yeah, I know that it's upsetting to some people, but I've seen it so many times. And it really starts to make me think. And that's one of the reasons why I have a therapist, and one of the reasons why I've learned how to speak to doctors, and I've actually read books on how to communicate, how to stay calm, because doctors will stop believing you. And you do have to, kind of pick your battles with things. If you want to eventually get someplace, or if you want doctors to actually believe you. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope that nobody gets offended by it. I think we kind of have to start being honest about things that are going on in our community. I know that there are people that are going to say, oh, this is ableist BS, and blah, blah, blah. But, the truth hurts sometimes. And like I said, it's doing all of us a disservice because we're often looked at as a group. So thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment if you would like, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.